Welcome to this explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to get into this one with you today. We're diving straight into the inner world, the actual lived experience of elite Border Patrol agents operating on what's known as the quiet line. And just a heads up, we are completely leaving geography and politics at the door today. Instead, we're zooming way in on the human psyche. We're going to unpack the deep isolation, that intense introspection, and, those really heavy, invisible burdens these folks carry out there on the remote frontiers. So let's just jump right in and explore the hidden psychological realities of the quiet line.
Long stretches of nothing. I really want you to think about what that phrase actually implies when it's not just a passing thought, but your entire daily reality. We almost always picture border security as this constant, high-octane action movie, right? But the source text paints a starkly different picture of the psychology required to actually do this job. The defining feature of the quiet line? It's not constant chaos. It is deep, sweeping isolation. Just imagine standing in the pitch dark, completely surrounded by miles and miles of empty brush. The methodical, incredibly deliberate pace of this job means an agent is literally just left alone with their thoughts, waiting. It's the kind of environment that can totally play tricks on the mind. It demands a level of mental fortitude that honestly goes way beyond physical endurance. It is, quite literally, long stretches of absolutely nothing.
Okay, let's dive into this, because this is where the psychological paradox truly begins. You have that crushing monotony we just talked about, the sheer nothingness. But contrast that with the absolute demand to execute with total precision. Think about the immense psychological whiplash required to live your life in the space between those two extreme poles. Elite agents out on the quiet line are expected to go from 0 to 100 in a fraction of a second. They have to somehow sustain this intense state of hypervigilance during those endless stretches of silence, knowing full well that at any unpredictable second, a massive, high-stakes event could unfold. Literally, 1 minute you're just listening to the wind, and the exact next minute, flawless execution is required. It's a constant, utterly draining contradiction. You're bored out of your mind, yet your adrenaline is perpetually hovering just beneath the surface, ready to spike.
And all that isolation brings with it a profoundly heavy ethical burden. The source material uses two incredibly powerful terms here that we really need to unpack: moral weight and mechanism. See, when an elite agent is out there on the quiet line, they aren't just an individual person with their own personal philosophies anymore. No, they become the literal physical mechanism of a state policy. Think about what it actually means to be a mechanism. You are an instrument. You are the point of the spear for overarching massive state rules. Every single action you take, every person you encounter out there, it involves enforcing a policy that was probably designed in a distant capital somewhere. And carrying out that policy on a raw human level, face-to-face in the wilderness, that carries an immense moral weight. The individual agent basically has to absorb the entire ethical reality of the state's blueprint.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how it frames the ultimate test. What happens when all these factors crash together at 2 in the morning, miles and miles from civilization? Put yourself in those boots for a second. You are the mechanism of the state, you're holding the immense moral weight of your actions, and suddenly, snap, the nothingness is broken. You are forced to make a life-altering choice, and you aren't making it in some brightly lit boardroom with a whole team of advisors. You are entirely in the dark. The specific gravity of that single moment, the sheer density of the responsibility resting on one person's shoulders out there in the pitch black, it is just absolutely staggering to comprehend.
Let's break down the exact anatomy of that on-the-ground decision-making process. Step 1. Operating in the dark. And yeah, that is both literal and figurative. Step 2. Gathering incomplete information. Now, this is where the tension really spikes. Out in the field, you almost never, ever have the full picture. You see a quick shadow in the brush. You hear the snap of a twig. You just have these tiny fragments of context. Yet despite having only a few pieces of the puzzle, you are immediately shoved right into Step 3, executing state policy. The timeline shrinks. The adrenaline is surging. You have to act right now. The luxury of sitting around waiting for perfect information, that just doesn't exist on the quiet line. The agent has to bridge this massive gap between totally incomplete information and definitive, immediate action, knowing the consequences are permanent and profound.
Let's move to and see how this builds as we start to zoom way out. We're stepping back from the individual agent's boots on the ground to look at the towering institutional perspective above them. We're shifting our focus to what the source identifies as Level 8, the sector chief. Right, so up until now in this explainer, we've been super hyper-focused on the micro, the lone agent, the dark, the incomplete info, that immediate moral weight. But level 8? That represents the system itself, The sector chief isn't out there sweating in the dark brush, they're in a command center, looking at the entire board. It's like a giant puzzle. The environment totally changes from immediate, tactical survival on the ground to long-term strategic administration from above.
And this macro perspective leads us to a pretty sobering, honestly almost chilling reality from the source text. Institutional decisions are judged not by what they intended, but by what they produced. Wow. Just let that sink in. When you are the agent on the ground, your intentions matter deeply to you, right? You are wrestling with that incredibly heavy moral weight. But when those actions filter all the way up the chain to level 8 leadership, the perspective undergoes a massive shift. The institution simply does not grade on a curve of good intentions. The institution, the state, the sector chief, they are looking purely at the outcome. They look at the results. That messy, complex, deeply human reality of making a split-second choice in the dark, it all just gets distilled down into a cold, hard metric of production.
And this brilliantly illustrates the massive, gaping disconnect between the micro and the macro. On one side, you have the deeply human element, the intentions, the moral weight, the real-time struggle of the individual agent just trying to do the right thing with completely incomplete information. And then on the exact opposite side, you have the institutional metric of production, the results, the final tally reviewed by level 8. It's wild because the individual agent is basically trapped carrying the heavy, psychological burden of their intent, while the overarching system that they serve as a mere mechanism for, well, it only calculates the output.
So, the crucial point is, how do these two worlds actually ever reconcile? How does the intensely personal moral weight carried by an elite agent making high-stakes decisions in the dead of night ever align with the cold, results-driven judgment of the massive institution they serve? Can a system that really only judges production ever truly account for the raw psychological realities of the quiet line? It's this massive, unresolved ethical tension, a profound paradox between the human being acting as a mechanism and the machine that measures their output. I really want to leave you with that provocative thought to ponder. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and remember to keep questioning the deeper structures behind the world we see.